Hi, everyone, and welcome to The X, a podcast from inside Silicon Valley about how experience shapes everything, from products to businesses to entire industries. I'm Brian McClain, and I'm here with Demetrius Madrigal. Today is an exciting and very special day. Two of the core designers and friends of ours from GoPro are joining us on the podcast to talk about user experience, design, and what it takes to build the best action cameras in the world. Steve Yu and Grant McCauley have been at GoPro designing cameras since the beginning and just recently launched the GoPro Hero 11. We're delighted to have them today, and we hope you enjoy this conversation. Good morning, guys. How you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having us.
Awesome.
Doing great. Yeah, thank you.
This is a pretty exciting thing for me. One of the things that I was just telling Demetrius the other day was what a memorable time it was being with you guys during the Hero. I think we were on the 3 Plus and the 4 at the time in which we, contracted with you guys to kind of help with the release of those cameras. And it was actually before GoPro became a public company. And I was just curious, what do you remember about that time? I mean, there was such a wonderful group of people that was surrounding us in the design and kind of research space.
Yeah, that's definitely a special time for me as well. I feel like, we were growing and we were, launching, the next camera. The Hero 4 was like a really big deal to me. Because, it had the first integrated touch display.
Yep.
And it was just like a hub of activity. I think we just had opened up that new building, that new extension building is kind of how I remember hanging out with you guys. But yeah, it was definitely an exciting time.
What about you, Grant? What do you remember from that time? I mean, that was an exciting time, but it was also a very busy time. I mean, we were there probably a good 10 hours a day at least.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we were definitely very busy. I think the thing that comes to mind first, though, and it's one of those things that I guess when you have like a really new experience, you get chills, you have something like that gives you that kind of reaction. It just sticks in your brain.
Yeah.
And I mean, when you said 3 Plus, I just remember this moment where just a little ahead of the release of that camera, somebody came into we were all sharing an office, and somebody came in and was like, hey, I got a little bit ahead of time the reel for 3 Plus. It's going to be coming out. We all knew it, right? And we closed the door and we found a display and we put it on. And I just remember watching that video and literally getting chills through my body when I saw some of the first camera angles and the magic that, the media team puts together, but also just kind of representing the work that we did, that we're doing. It just kind of blew my mind. So 3 Plus was special. It was one of the first product that I was in-house for. And then 4, like Steve said, just awesome innovation that happened there when we were able to integrate the display. That was a game changer. We worked really closely on that product and the interface. So just a lot of passion and innovation around that time.
It's funny that you say that because I felt like just from a global perspective or like a sports industry's perspective, it was the 3 Plus and the 4 that really launched everything. I remember at the time, I had the original Hero, not the one that you put on your wrist, but the one right after that. I don't remember what the wrist one was actually called, but I think it was was it GoPro wrist or something?
Was it 35 millimeter?
The 35 millimeter. Yeah. I had the very first one right after that.
The first digital. Yeah.
The first digital. Yeah. And I remember using that and thinking in my mind, I can't even believe I have a camera of this quality in my hand and doesn't have a tape in it. Doesn't have anything. It was something that changed, but it was such a dramatic shift on the 3 Plus and 4, where it was now the world can build videos like you've always dreamed of or imagined. And I think that at the end of the day, it will be seared in my mind forever that was a pivotal moment for the industry, not just for GoPro, but for everybody who was part of it. But before we kind of get into that, because I do have some questions about these amazing videos that were produced by GoPro, I think it'd be helpful for all the listeners for you guys to kind of give them a background. Okay. So maybe we'll start with you, Steve. Can you give a background of what was your education? How did you get to GoPro? And then what are some of the products that you worked on at GoPro since you've been there?
Yeah. So I'm the director of user experience for our cameras and our accessories. So pretty much all the hardware.
Mm-hmm.
But I should also mention and give a shout out that there's a lot of design teams at GoPro. There's an industrial design team that helps create that really iconic camera that everybody knows and
Oh
loves.
yeah.
There's also a UX team in San Diego that designs all of our amazing apps. And then, of course, there are other design teams that do like the website and the e-com. So we're just one of many design teams at GoPro, but I think we have the best gig.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's hard to believe sometimes when I look back and think, that I spent over 10 years here. I think it speaks a lot to the company and the culture. What attracted me to come to GoPro was it was that perfect intersection of my experience as a designer. I've done design pretty much all of my professional career. And, I actually learned interaction design like on the job and
Okay.
but was able to combine that with my hobbies and interests in life, the things that I was really passionate about. So mountain biking, motorcycling, rock climbing,
Yeah.
just being outdoors, living my best life. And I think that's what made coming to GoPro and being here like so special for me.
Yeah. So did you start your did you get your education basically in design, or did you
I
get it in something else?
I did. I did. And I would be like dating myself pretty severely here. And, back then it was all like, you know, just the very beginnings of coding for the web and like
Hmm.
desktop publishing and, 3D animation. It was a program that threw everything at you to try to prepare you. But I don't think that human computer interaction, user experience design were just common household terms like
They
they are
weren't.
today.
Yeah. 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 I
Hmm.
mean, I don't think that stuff really took off until, 2004, 5, 6, like around that time, people really started talking about it. But do you feel like the fundamentals, though, that you got from your education back then still applied, though, when you were kind of building your career and getting into user experience?
Yeah, I think the passion for design is what carries through. I've always been interested in design, making beautiful things, aesthetics of things. When you look at just how something's made or trying to understand how it was built,
Hmm.
or when you have products in your lives where you think like, I think I can make this better, or I think I can improve upon this, or hearing feedback from other people and be like, oh yeah, that is a good idea for this particular product, or that's an interesting idea for a completely new product. So I think that ties back to GoPro and innovation too. So I think it's the education definitely laid the groundwork. It gave me
Hmm.
the It gave me the chops, right? Pixel perfect, just like an eye to for sort of good design, balance, symmetry, things like that. But then also more recently, just the whole user experience aspect of it and having empathy for our users and thinking about how certain things are being used. So it's evolved over the years, I'd say, but I think the fundamentals have always been there from my education.
Yeah. So, what was the first product you worked on coming to GoPro?
Oh gosh, it had to be the Hero. It was a LCD backpack. God, I can't remember
Oh.
what it's called. Maybe it was just a touch backpack. I actually don't even think it was touch. It was just um, the Hero at the time had a bunch of accessories that you could snap on the back,
Hmm.
and the display was one of them. And it allowed you to get live preview, allowed you to get some very basic information like battery life and maybe what mode you're shooting in. And that evolved into a touch backpack where it didn't even have swipes and it was purely tapping, so our navigation had to reflect, like you tap up and down to move through lists. But it was still a huge step forward from the early GoPros with no displays where, you're using buttons and they used to have printouts of like little Morse code of like, press this button and then press that button to get, into settings, for example. So the display was, well, yeah, one of the first things that I worked on, and I'm glad because that kind of paved the way for a big breakthrough, like we said in Hero 4 Silver, where we had the integrated display.
Were you already using GoPros before you got the job, though? Like,
Yeah,
had you heard about it and you were all kind of dug into it?
absolutely. Yeah, I was really into it because of, as I mentioned before, just part of my lifestyle of being out and about and you want to share these cool experiences with your friends that, maybe weren't able to go. And then the video was like the next best thing. And
Hmm.
it wasn't just any video, because I think I tried all of the early cameras that just didn't really produce the results that I wanted. And I finally, went and bought myself a Hero camera and I remember attaching it to a length of PVC pipe. for my own version of a selfie stick, right? And I created a snowboard video that I still watch today because it just brings back so many memories. But um, that video, I think, also helped me land the job at GoPro. It's one of those things I ended with in the interview. I'm like, by the way, check this out. I don't just, speak design. I actually really geeked about this product.
Well, I think you're tapping into something that I think is super important, especially to some of our younger listeners, is that when you're really passionate about something and you go to interview or you go to talk to the company that you're interested in, whether it be an informational interview or an actual interview, it's like coming in with that extra like 10% of like, oh, by the way, do you mind if I show you this video that I created with your product, right? It kind of shows the passion for it. And I feel like that's super important. And I remember at that time, when I had that original GoPro, for example, it reminded me of like high school where like I had some friends that skateboarded and we had like old like VHS recording, devices and stuff. And someone would lay on the ground and someone else would jump over and all that stuff. We weren't being paid for that. There was no social media. We just did it because it was super cool and interesting. Right. And
That's
so you
right.
brought some of that actually to your interview and you're like, hey, look what I created. And I think that's a really, really cool approach. I do have a question though. Like when you came in, did you already have experience kind of working on cameras professionally though?
No, I didn't, and that is a great question because, to be honest, I at one point I was like, man, GoPro, they're so cool. Like, how could I ever, work for a company like this at the time? Because they just they were already putting out amazing videos and content. So, and I was just like blown away by that. And I'm like, I want to be part of that. And but I didn't know anything about cameras. I worked in technology. I had done a lot of interaction design for phones
Mm-hmm.
and other consumer electronics. So I think that pointed me in the right direction. It was within the right industry and the right sort of working on certain display sizes and kind of some of those constraints that come with working on smaller devices. So I think that helped. But the amazing thing is I learned so much at GoPro working on what it takes to like build a camera
Oh
and
yeah.
all that goes into the camera. I joke about how I thought maybe they would pay me to just, go mountain bike and motorcycle and test their cameras, right? But since then I've learned so much about what it takes to build a camera. So I think, some of the advice or comments to like, some of the younger listeners is be, open mind. Like, yeah, you may not have all the background, you know, in a particular product. I mean, definitely educate yourself and learn as much as you can, but just be ready. You're going to learn so much more. So you need to have that open mind and, things you thought you knew, might get challenged. But I think it's really key. It's just coming in here with like, I'm ready to learn everything. Just teach me everything.
Yeah, I mean, I remember with Grant, I want to definitely get your background. Thanks, Steve, as well. But I remember walking up to Grant's desk and kind of sitting on his desk, actually, and saying, like, I have no idea what any of these controls mean. Like, I was like, I get the camera, I use the camera, but like the minute you hit the advance button and it's just like when would I keep my ISO open? When would I do this? And it was you, Grant, that it said like, oh, well, use this if you're trying to do this. And like, here's a book to reference. And it was just like, there's a huge amount of education when you dive deep into actually like customization and stuff like that of the videos you're creating. But Grant, I want to hear from you too. Like, can you tell us a little bit about your background and kind of how you got into this position? Because you actually, I think, started before anyone else. You were at the original office in like Half Moon Bay, right?
That's right. I mean, so there was a contract agency before I was there, but
Uh-huh.
technically, I mean, I was the first full-time hire for a user experience role at GoPro. Um, but to take a step back, I mean, and this is going to sound so cheesy, but man, it feels like I was destined to like work for GoPro. I
Yeah.
mean, I I grew up doing all the action sports, just skateboarding, snowboarding if I could, wakeboarding, anything on a board. I was just like exposed to early on. I gravitated to, and then as a little bit later in life, you know, I just started finding my way to photography and videography. Very similar to what you said, where
Hmm.
you're like with your buddies, and I love the skateboarding, but I also enjoyed kind of making art and filming it, and I kind of just started doing that naturally. And then, I actually had an older sister. I have an older sister who exposed me to action sport industry when she joined Reef,
Oh, okay.
known for their sandals, but
Yep.
bigger impact than that. And she took me to the ASR convention in San Diego. And I remember just having my mind blown because I had this idea of what the corporate world was like. But there it was like all these guys in sandals and t-shirts and like clapping high fives and everyone's walking around. And I was like, you work like at the coolest place ever. But I was like, I literally asked her, I was like, how do I get into this? I was approaching college.
Uh-huh.
She's like, well, you like arts, and she knew I was kind of like making my own stickers and doing little things at home. And she's like, so maybe graphic design
Mm-hmm.
would be like a great place for you. She kind of gave me that insight. And so in college, I searched out graphic design, and amongst other things, I got into college. I started working through that degree, and I realized that they had, a lot of extracurricular or different avenues for photography, videography, and just media in general. And I started doing that so much that I pretty much gained a minor in photography
Oh, okay. I didn't know
while I
that.
was studying, for graphic design. So it kind of started merging already back then. And
Mm-hmm.
like you said, like I exposed myself. I learned slowly the controls and the advanced controls, and it wasn't actually my own. Uh, I got introduced again through a family member. My twin brother started at GoPro. He was around like the early 20th member of the company. And he actually gave me a Hero 2. And I was doing a project in school. And he said he saw I was using, I think it was a flip camera at the time that they had given me.
Are you talking about the one that has just only the red button on it?
I
You
think
remember?
so. It flips out the USB out the bottom too.
Yep,
And kind
yep.
of
It
cool.
had like a one button record or something on it, if I remember right. Yeah.
Yeah, and they handed those out for this class, and he was like, "Dude, check this out." And hadn't taken much of an interest. I kind of didn't know enough about what he was doing, but I took the camera and I used it for just a couple clips. And I remember comparing, like when I watched it back on the Hero 2, I was blown away.
Mm.
And I was like, "Wow!" So I showed my teacher, and he was like, "Wow." Next thing I know, I was doing my project, and I got super deep in the weeds. I was using the 3D capability. He had given me the, you know, two cameras, a 3D hero system, and I started making like content that was like I had to give my classmates 3D glasses, and I was really nerding out on this stuff. So, I mean, I was kind of destined at that point to apply, and I really gravitate towards this idea that 10% extra that that you care about during the
Hmm.
interview, because I don't think I came into the interview very strong with real world application of my skills and how it's going to attribute to the business or whatnot. I came in with a lot of abstract, you know, run of the mill college degree concept things
Hmm.
that I've done. But what I think helped stand out was like I did this like photography thing where I documented all my friends, a mountain climber, a skateboarder, a snowboarder, a surfer, and kind of the things that they carry on them, and did like a little lifestyle piece. And I think we spent the most time in the interview kind of looking over that and talking about it and just my
Hmm.
passion for photography. And when I reflect back, I think that really helped seal the deal because I didn't have a great portfolio other than I had used the camera and I could talk a little bit about
Yeah.
done. So
I think some of this says something about the culture of GoPro because one of the things that we've been learning, and we actually got this from a couple of other interviews that we have done, is that the industry, not this industry, but the tech industry in general, has started to get to this point where they want you to have every little specific thing that they need to get done already accomplished. So it's like, oh, well, Grant has already worked on cameras. He's already worked on, like, but to say like, hey, like he's interested, he's got a lot of experience, like he'll be great here, but he doesn't necessarily, maybe he necessarily haven't worked on a camera before. And I think it speaks a lot to the culture. And I wanted to ask you guys a little bit about the culture because we were talking about before we started, obviously. I have never worked with a group of people that were so dialed into what they are interested in, surrounding around a product and a mission like a GoPro. Like to this day, we talk about it. Like Dee and I have worked with, I don't know, so many companies I can't even think of them. But the most fun we ever had was with GoPro. The most we've ever learned probably was with GoPro. The most like connected we ever felt with people was at GoPro. And it sounds to me like that's still going today. So like how do you sustain a culture like that? And how has it felt, over the last decade or so that you guys have been there?
Yeah, I think it's just really speaks to the DNA of the company, right? I think it just attracts people who are adventurous, or people who are living their best lives, or people who have something to share. I think it just
Mhm.
attracts those type of people. I mean, it's not a requirement, but it just magically somehow draws in a certain, perspective.
Yeah.
And I think that for me, when I look at it, for me personally, it was a lot of it was Nick, the CEO and founder,
Yeah.
who, you know, came up with this whole entire category of this product, being on a surf trip, right? And I think that it just trickles down. It's infectious, right? In every department and every, in all the years that I've been here, you will always meet somebody who is really jazzed about something, right? They're either, we've got skydivers, we've got surfers, we've got, mountain bikers, we've got all kinds. And again, it's not a prerequisite, but like there's something about the company's DNA that draws in folks like this.
Well, there was when we were there, there were people that were interested in film. There were people that were
Yeah.
interested in sports, and there was no judgment. It wasn't just like, oh, look at all the surfers hang out in that corner and the mountain bikers. Everyone hung out together, and everybody was always saying, "Hey, you've never done this before. During lunch, you want me to show you how to do it? You want to try riding my bike in the parking lot?" Like just a very open culture in that way. And I was wondering if maybe it's because the mission set early by Nick was so clear, right? Like it was like, here's what we're doing with GoPro, here's the products that we have for it. And it attracted basically people, like you said, who are just passionate about whatever they're interested in and filming it.
I think that's absolutely right. And it is, like you said, it is still going strong today. That's just, um, I think, even with, now there's even, it's more recognition of, the type of things that we do, the design, the product, the marketing, for instance, like, have you guys heard or seen anything about the $1 million challenge?
I have. I saw that and I was like, wow, because I
Yeah,
didn't that start a little while ago,
it
and you
did.
guys have continued that.
Yeah, yeah. So it just encourages customers to go out and like pick up the latest hero camera and go and capture some amazing footage. And it's a contest essentially, but you just see how people are so excited about sharing and creating amazing content, things that we don't even think of, right? So it
Yeah.
just draws in, not only people who make content, but people who want to work here.
Yeah, I mean, how have you seen the industry evolve over the last, decade? Or like for you, Grant, like starting like in the Half Moon Bay office with like the hero, original hero, whatever's like when you just like step back for a minute and take a deep breath and do that 30,000 foot view, like has the industry pretty much stayed the same? Meaning like you just have a bunch of action sports people and they love filming, or has there been an evolution that you can kind of, from a broad stroke perspective, that you kind of see occurred over the years?
I mean, evolution is going to happen across the board in so many different factors.
Hmm.
There's, I mean, if you take like surfing, for instance, just an action sport, taking it from that perspective, like the sports have evolved. There's foiling now. Now there's e-foiling, right?
Yep.
Like things are getting advanced or in different ways. And I think if you think about that, and then you contrast it with technology, and you say, oh, like, I used to carry a gimbal, or I used to carry and then I started mounting a gimbal when they got smaller and lightweight. And now, hyper smooth, the innovation there in our cameras, it's built into the camera. Then the fingers got built into the camera,
Hmm.
right? Like things are getting simpler, and they're more all in one, right? Like we're looking at, less is more. We used to provide a lot of accessory. And I think people in the world have gotten so complicated that you're looking for a little less these days,
Yeah.
less that can do more delivering on, the promise of capturing life's moments and sharing it and creating positivity.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean,
and
I think the hyper smooth example is like spot on because I was thinking about that the other day, like the whole gimbal thing. I mean, there was a movement of everyone had a gimbal and you got to carry it, and then suddenly it's like, oh, well, we just solved that problem with software. And it's like,
It
that's a
is,
massive industry shift right there.
it is amazing when you think about it because even mechanical stabilizers were kind of a bit of a game changer when they got to be that small, right?
Yep.
And but and it made so much sense for GoPro because all of the action sports have potentially a lot of vibration or a lot of shakiness, right? Because you're just doing these activities sometimes full throttle, right?
Yeah.
And it made so much sense. And I remember like, yeah, having being so psyched on Karma Grip
Yep.
because I could have that, but I'd have the gimbal on my chest with the camera, running an extension cord to a battery to my backpack with the grip in there, and thinking, all right, please don't wreck, don't crash,
Yeah.
And now the evolution of it is it's gotten so good with technology that it's all integrated and you could never it makes it hard to watch some of the old footage again, right?
Yeah, well, it's funny. You watch the old footage and you go like, "Wow, that's so shaky compared to now." But it's like it wasn't shaky then. Like
Yeah,
it looked great then compared to the normal stuff.
yeah.
And true story, the grip that I have for my GoPro, that I still have, was actually created by Grant in his garage and given to me for Christmas.
No way. You have one of those, the bike grip?
I still use it.
The
Yeah,
Grant Grip.
the Grant grip. I still use the Grant grip every once in a while when I'm doing something. And that is the same one. I think it came from a mountain bike handle, right?
Yeah, I did. God, there's so many people too. It's a company of tinkerers also, right? I mean, I just find that I think user experience, it's so pervasive in my life and problem solving. And I think it makes me smile to hear that you still use it, that it solves a
Yeah.
problem for you. Because, me and my buddies, we run into stuff, and I think it's just natural now to want to solve it for yourself. And the company does a great job. There's floats. I don't think ours does.
I
But
don't know if that one does. I don't think it does. I
yeah, I
usually
wouldn't
have a
test
float on
it.
the back. So
Yeah,
Um,
I gotta say our R&D team probably improved on that just a little bit. Yeah, Grant there.
that's what I love, is that somebody gets on board and they're really the master of that design and the owner, and they take it to the next level because they're like immersed in that. Um, but it's great to hear. That's funny.
yeah, it's like I said, still use it today. And so one thing I wanted to bring up was like in 2019 when you guys invited us over to that event at GoPro. It was really fun. It was I forgot what the film was, but it was a pretty cool film that was shown there. When we came in, the first thing you did, since we hadn't been there in a few years, you took us over to that wall where it shows all the progressions of the cameras. And it was kind of emotional a little bit because I was like, you see the progression and then you know where you were during that time. And because we had so much fun, I was like, I want to come back. And so we were looking at the progression there, and I'm really curious for you guys when you stand there, you walk in the building and you see all those cameras from beginning to where you are right now. Like, what do you think about? Like, what runs through your mind when you see that? Because it's kind of a powerful. I mean, it's the wall is so huge and everything is so clear. It's like a mural, basically, right?
Hmm. Yeah, it's a really beautiful, well done timeline. I feel a lot of pride. I feel a great sense of accomplishment because you stare at that and you look at each camera, and Grant and I know every little nuance of all the kind of blood, sweat, and tears that went into each one, and
Yep.
how each one has gotten better. And you think like we got our work cut out for us, like what? How is the next one going to top this one? And then the funny thing is like, hey, we're running out of wall space.
That's true because I'm
They
right
always
around the
had,
corner.
yeah, they always had the last one right at the very end, and then after a new camera launch, magically everything, you'd come back after a weekend and you'd be like, oh, they added the new camera. How did they do that? They must have like compressed like all of the previous cameras. But yeah, that is I get a little emotional too when I stare at that, and I think like, wow, look at how far we've come. And it's always great to show off friends and family. That wall is it's a great way to show like, man, look at all the milestones and look at all the great products that we've been able to crank out.
Yeah. What about you, Grant? What do you feel when you see that wall?
Oh man, that's I love talking about this. This is so funny because I've walked past that so many times and just kind of like you do stop, you do look at that, and I guess I mean I definitely feel the pride for sure, but I love seeing that there's this really rugged device at the beginning with all these like screws going around the lens, and like you're like oh you can't destroy this thing at all. But I love that it shapes up so beautifully toward as it keeps going, but
Yeah.
it still holds that rugged waterproof factor. It's just like we're just elegantly designing it the hard edges, and it's like sitting there with a sculpture and just slowly bringing it down until it's just this masterpiece. And also just kind of like how logical it is. You kind of like see it from a bird's eye view. You have perspective, and you're like, this was logical. This makes sense. It got a little bit smaller when the display comes in, and then it goes to the front, and you're like, wow, yeah, that was always coming if you just kept working, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, and then I always think like Steve said, and it's a little bit different, but it's the same. Is like, what's next?
Yeah.
You
I'm
kind of look
sure.
at it, you see that empty space, or it's coming, and you're like, you want to know, you're like, what's the next iteration going to be?
Yeah. And that kind of is a great segue to talking about kind of user experience and stuff. And from an industry perspective, I have a question based on what you just said there, Grant. So early on, I felt personally like all the screws in the camera is what built confidence in me that when I take that thing and I drop it off my mountain bike, or I don't know, do some other crazy thing that I probably shouldn't be doing at my age, is that it's not going to break. Everything's going to be fine. And that was a visual indicator that everything was going to be solid. Okay. But over time, it has shifted to the point where the camera has the same quality, but it looks so smooth and, like you said, like it's just visually different now. It doesn't have a screw in it and all that kind of stuff. I'm curious from your guys' perspective of like, did the industry shift and it was okay to not show screws and things like that anymore? Or is it something else that I'm not aware of? Because like suddenly I still trust the GoPro, but yet I only trusted it early on because it looked like it was made by the military.
Hmm. hmm I think it's very true that perspective you had of the very first GoPros because I felt that way too. I felt that the exposed screws gave a perception of ruggedness and
Yes.
durability, and of course they served function at the time. Right, we were working with the materials that we had at the time, but I think there is also been a shift to make things beautiful and elegant. And I think that it is a feat of engineering that we have the durability that we do in the latest hero cameras, and they don't need to have exposed screws, for example, right? I
Yeah.
think that's props to the engineering team, like in terms of like the glass, the cover glass and the materials that they choose and select to. I mean, they go through so much rigorous testing
Yeah.
to ensure that it lives up or is better than the previous generation.
But do you feel like from a UX perspective though, like if I was standing there and you were like, okay, here's this super rugged visual version, right? And we always start that way, right? On everything in every industry. And then you kind of look forward and you say, oh, the next one maybe doesn't have that rugged look. It looks rugged. It's so hard to explain, but like it looks rugged, but it doesn't have the screws in it. And for me, I needed that in my mind,
Mhm.
but I didn't need it. There was something
Mhm.
you guys did that made me forget about it.
Yeah, there are some trade-offs there, good trade-offs in that you didn't need the water housing, right? You didn't need
Yes.
like the extra doors to access like the back,
Hmm.
touch display, and you didn't need, like now the fingers are integrated, for example. So
Hmm.
there were gains, and and just like even little details of just like a smoother form factor, like fitting it in and out of your pocket, for example. There are things like that. There were like all the little details like that kind of add up to sort of the gains of like moving away from like the super rugged thing. And I think there's some perception to it too. Like, when you look at just evolution of products, in general, things have, either gotten smaller or perception of smaller,
Mhm.
More compact, less is more kind of thing. So I think that's just reflective of just like trends in general.
Yeah, and I think it's a point I wanted to make because I think people who are interested in the field of user experience or people who are just interested in understanding like how designers and researchers think, uh, is you're not necessarily afraid to move away from an initial look or feel as long as there's a core understanding that the product value stays. And like, I'm very curious from both of your guys' perspective of like, when you're thinking about the next products, and I know we can't talk specifically about like things that you guys are building right now, but like when you think about them, how do you consider them? Like if there's people listening to this that are going like, I'm just getting started in this field and you guys have developed 10 cameras, like how do you keep going and continue to evolve creatively? Like what are your guys' individual processes for creativity?
Great question. Just taking a quick step back is like, I wonder, and I'm just pondering this, but at the beginning, we had to build the brand a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I was like, when I would tell someone I worked at GoPro, I'd have to be like, the action sports camera, I'd hold my fingers like in a little frame up on top of my forehead. And they go, oh, okay, yeah, I kind of know. But I also just wonder, after a while, the brand name is pervasive. It's out there.
True.
And
Yeah.
all of a sudden, like maybe they understand that that's synonymous, that rugged form factor and durability. And so maybe that alleviated a little bit of that concern. But to your question, I think it's just like I get my best insights when I'm out using the product.
Okay.
I think that's a little bit of what's unique. I think, and being at GoPro, you mentioned this, like people get you into everything. And if you're a little more nerdy, you might pick up on, information about whatever your interests are regarding that field or that topic. And if you're an action sport guy, like Steve's got me into mountain biking, spent way too much money, uh, rock climbing. And my garage is full of like these, a kayak or something like that. I never thought I would try, but everybody's encouraging and outgoing. And I think when you start experiencing that and then you bring in the product that you love and you test that, or you're just actually using it because that's, you're trying to capture that moment and
Yeah.
remember it yourself, you start having these thoughts. You start realizing that maybe you can slim down something, or maybe this button isn't best positioned there because the screen's locked, or maybe you needed to use a remote or an accessory, and all of a sudden you're realizing that the beeps are too low, and you need how can I solve that problem?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I think it is passion driven, and it's not necessarily sitting in there in a room and trying to come up with what the future is. It's kind of like being out there, and uh, one of the principles for GoPro is really like making friends is one of the things that we
Okay.
value. I think all the collaboration and just going to these events or sitting there and talking to someone on the beach that has one, and they just tell you what their problems are or what they love. It all starts forming ideas, and it all starts forming direction, and it all starts iterating on what we have. So for me, it's just always staying curious, and adventuring in my own life kind of leads to these, oh, that's what's next, or listening to others, listening to our users, our core.
Mm-hmm.
We have great beta test teams. We have real professionals. I mean, very busy lives, but they're just going full throttle, and they give us these. Their problems are a little bit different. So you kind of take it all in and synthesize, and next thing you know, you're improving the camera.
Yeah. Let me push you a little deeper. Just to shake your brain up a little bit. So something like, let's say, the Maverick Big Wave contest or something like that in Half Moon Bay. Like, would you find yourself actually like walking up to people that have them mounted on their boards and just asking them how it went, letting them know maybe that you work at GoPro? Like, are there moments where you do that, where you have that like direct connection, and you might like write some notes and stuff on what they found, especially when using it in something like a crazy big contest like that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I feel like that's, I mean, I think your brain as a designer, your brain kind of never stops, right? You're
Yeah.
always at any product. It doesn't have to be GoPro, it's like all the products in your home, etc. But it's especially cool working here in that, as I mentioned earlier, all the different hobbies that you do, you show up at the ski lift and you see somebody with a GoPro, and sometimes it's cool to ask them like, hey, how do you like that? Or what's your experience with that? And sometimes you want to tell them you work there, and they get super excited about that and want to share everything with you.
Oh, I'm
And then
sure.
sometimes it's beautiful to just sit back and watch, right? I
Yeah.
think you can also get a lot of empathy for our users this way. You watch them interact with it. Maybe you catch them struggling. Sometimes, maybe they're put it on a tripod, and you watch how they interact with the accessories, and then it's kind of like you come in at the right moment of being like, hey, how's this working out for you? Or what are you trying to do here? Or how do you like that mount or that setup? Or what kind of settings do you use for this event? So I love it. I think that's kind of because the product is out there, not only at a special event like Mavericks,
Hmm.
but like just out in the wild. It's so great to be able to have that opportunity to interact with people and get their direct feedback. And usually they're big fans. They really want to see the product improve, or they feel happy to share, so it's really easy to get details out. GoPro Mountain Games is another great one where,
Oh yeah.
it's just a hub. It's a epicenter of like bringing together all the fans, and it's a great way to get a lot of information.
So, like a great example of this is that we did an interview. I don't know if you guys heard it or not, with Justin Graham, who was Jamie O'Brien's filmer, and he also has Out There TV. And so we've actually done 2 episodes with him because everybody who listens loves to hear them, which means they're going to love to hear you guys. And so one of the things that he said is that he has got a whole series of He's got tons of GoPros and stuff because they're filming from the beach, they're filming on the boards, they're filming everywhere. And they're really stress testing these things. I mean, when you look at it, it's like next level, right? Because they're losing them in the ocean, swimming down and finding them, actually returning them to people when they do find them and they're not theirs. All these different things that happen. Uh, do you guys ever get the opportunity to kind of like chat with people like that are really kind of hammering the product, so to speak, and then get their kind of feedback? And how much does that actually matter when it comes to revising the next version of the camera?
Yeah. I mean, speaking from experience, I've been fortunate enough, and I think GoPro opened the door to a lot of these experiences, to be out on the North Shore. We had a house, a media house out there, like right on the beach. And I came out and I got to spend an afternoon with Anthony Walsh, who's
Okay.
just an insanely good surfer out there. And, I was a little timid, but I had been working on the Karma project at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And we came out, and I remember he was very kind, showed us all his kind of setups and what the problems he was having. But he was, shooting in the waves. I think he had like a duct tape hand grip or something. And, he's like kind of explaining why this was working. And he showed me, one of the problems is like when you have a drone and you're on the sandy beach, which I never
Mm-hmm.
really ran into very often, is to launch the thing, right? You can't
Yeah.
have all the sand kicking up and getting in the motors and getting in your face. And um, I don't know why it never occurred to me, but they took the Pelican case that they traveled with and they flipped it upside down and they put it on the sand and they used it as a launch pad. And it's just
Wow.
these like,
Okay.
he's sharing with me pretty intimately, like from perspectives I can't understand because I don't go to the beach every day, or I'm not surfing waves like he is or doing anything crazy. But it's just those little tidbits from somebody who's just exposed to it nonstop and is trying to solve a problem or has solved it and would just like, a more polished solution made by us to really get it out to the masses.
Yeah, they actually support each other too. I don't know if you noticed that when you were there, but like, I remember watching a video and a couple of the surfers couldn't figure out how to properly mount to get the right angle for their footage and stuff, because there's different mounts and things like that, and a lot of those guys have made custom mounts actually in their garages. And so they would go over to Jamie O'Brien's house because he's like really good at it, and you see them flipping things over and drilling holes and like figuring all that stuff out. Do you guys ever get the opportunity to be there during things like the Vulcan Pipe Pro or anything like that, where you can support them? Like, is there a team at GoPro that kind of supports them, or is it at the point now where like they've got it and it's more of just they reach out if they need something?
There are a lot of teams that are like on site, at these that run these events that their jobs are to support. I can't speak to all the details because I don't know. I don't get a chance to go to a ton of these, right? So, but I do know that it's pretty well staffed, at these different events. And I think also our media team are usually present at things, and they are a wealth of knowledge. A wealth of knowledge and experience, so they know how to help set up athletes or help athletes set up for best shot, best capture. The events that I've been to, yeah, they bring pretty much the whole mobile shop of accessories and things are ready, right?
Yeah.
So there's definitely like staff, there. But yeah, it's, for the ones that we've been part of or been available, like there's plenty of opportunity to share information and gather.
So then to me, it seems like there's a ton of potential use cases, right? I mean, obviously, right? And I'm curious, like, can you guys give me an example of, like, Grant was saying, like, he'd go out and let's say take a kayak out, or no, a foil board, let's say, is a good one, because I think you surf, Grant, a lot, right? And so if you were taking your GoPro camera and you wanted to go stress test it and try it out on something brand new that you've never done before, what are some of the things that you would be thinking about as a designer and as a UX person while you're out on your foil board?
This is going to sound like totally backwards when I try to say it, but it's like, how do I get the camera out of my way? Right? It's
Okay.
like when you're having a new experience, and this is something I learned on a heliboarding trip. I got invited with a bunch of people that were so much better than I was. And I was just kind of put in this position where I didn't want to slow anyone down. So I was like really, high alert for just so many things. We're in a helicopter, we're like in Alaska. And I realized that day that like I forgot to record a bunch of times.
Oh,
Yeah, because I was I was like, I didn't want to be the guy that was messing around with the camera when everybody was taking these serious safety precautions and like, you're not ducking down and getting off a helicopter skid and you're like, and I was just trying to follow, everybody and not slow anyone down. Or like foiling for the first time. I didn't take a camera because I knew, I think from experience, that like I had a lot of other things to focus on.
mm-hmm.
And the problem that is constant is that we don't want to be, the best solution for us is to be there, but not be there. Like if you can design an experience or a way to mount that doesn't get in the way of the activity,
Mm-hmm.
I think you've really solved the problem. And then it comes down to capture. And this was like a drone problem too. That was very hard, is just remembering to hit that shutter button.
Yeah.
You're so immersed in the content. You're like, wow, look at the beach from this angle and everyone's over your shoulder. And then you land it and you're like, wait, right? So, I mean, the use cases are endless. We talk about use cases. Sometimes we have to really patrol the use cases because you could be underwater with, one hand you're holding a spear gun and the other one you've got this, and you have to kind of like decide a little bit. We've been able to navigate those a little bit better, but everybody can have some imagination, or a lot of them are.
How do you discern the difference though between a true use case and an edge case?
Wow, that's
A lot of debate.
A lot of debate. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's everything is like fair game, right? Like the ideas and the use cases that come in, everything is like worth a discussion,
Okay.
right? Where, we like to hear situations just play out because, in terms of someone having, coming up with a use case or, having an issue that they're trying to solve. So, because I feel like when you hear the whole story, then as as a designer, you can kind of peel back the layers and understand like what exactly are they trying to solve here, right?
Hmm.
Like, and then from there, when you peel back all the layers of what's the real issue here, right? Like for example, you're immersed, you're mountain biking, you got both hands on the handlebar, you're trying not to die, you're going, Mach speed, and you maybe forgot to hit the shutter button, and that's where voice command comes up, right? Like
Oh,
voice
yeah,
control,
yeah.
right?
Okay.
So it's things like that of like, and sometimes the beauty of it is the putting a use case through the process can also solve for other use cases too, right? And then you're onto something. You're like, oh, this voice command can work in a variety of situations. When I can't reach the camera, when the camera's mounted in a certain place where I can't touch the back display, because it's backed up against something. So I think it starts with a healthy discussion of the use case and then sort of peeling back the layers of what's the real issue that we're trying to solve here.
Yeah, and that process is not easy. Like I know it's easy for us to all like talk about it and describe it, but it takes a lot of thinking, a lot of testing, a lot of trying, and then someone to kind of just say yes or no at the end, right? Do you guys feel like there's an anxiety that builds as a UX designer as you get closer and closer to the time in which you need to release your product? Like, do you know what I mean? And does that help you in your work, or does it kind of make it challenging for you to think clearly and properly for what you're trying to achieve?
Yeah, I think the anxiety or excitement is about wanting to do our customers right.
Yeah.
Like this is a feature that's going to go on all of our cameras and be used all over the world. And like, let's make sure we get it right. So that's some of the anxiety. But at the same time, some of some of the features that we make there are things that are new for the first time, haven't been on a camera ever before. So
Hmm.
that's exciting. Some of these things you move in with a lot of confidence, like, oh my gosh, this is a game changer. People are going to love this. This is going to be great. And let's just make sure that we put it in the design in a way that users can access it or provide enough education around that they understand how to get the benefits of it. Right.
Yeah.
And but I think the cool thing about what we do also is that we work with consumer insights. We work
Yeah.
with analytics. We work with user research, and they help us. They help guide some of our decision making. And then, of course, we test internally. We test with our advocates, our athletes, our influencers. We get all these data points, and then we go through the design process of iteration. Maybe we were a little bit off, or maybe the feedback is like, this isn't people aren't quite understanding
Hmm.
this particular feature. And so, it might be back to the drawing board, or it might just need a little tweak. And so I think the teams at GoPro help us, you know, calm some of that anxiety.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, it's not just on you, right? I think that's the thing that helps calm anxiety sometimes is say, hey, it isn't just on us, but we do have to have ideas and perspectives. And I'm curious from the way in which you approach, let's say, a new concept or idea. So let's say that Grant's out on his mountain bike and nearly falls off and dies because he's trying to turn on his camera halfway down the hill, which actually happened to me. And early on, I was like going down the hill and I forgot to turn it on. And I tried to turn it on while I was going down the hill, and I almost went over the handlebars onto like a full rock field, and my heart just dropped into my stomach. I was just like, that could have been terrible. But this was like the Hero 3 or 2 or something like that. When that idea is brought to the table, like, how do you break it apart and decide whether or not it has value versus like, that was just for him and probably not for everybody else?
Wow. Well, I will say your life has value. So if we almost killed you trying to achieve what we're trying to do, we should probably listen closely. Um, Man, to internalize so many different perspectives, we rely heavily on the data, but our users will be very vocal once this thing's out in the wild. Let us know where we're failing them. So we take that to heart. It's pretty we are the closest listeners to all the reviews and
Mhm.
the feedback that comes in immediately when we put something out in the wild.
Yeah.
And
Do you feel like GoPro users are just more vocal than other products? Because I mean, because we talk to a lot of companies and they'll tell us like, oh, we get comments, positive, negative, but it's kind of all over the map. Do you find with your users that they're really, really like clear about what it is they want, need, and why?
I mean, are we listen? I don't. We're listening very intently. I
Yeah.
can't say. It's like I'm listening directly to the other end of that phone. So all the stuff that's coming back, maybe I'm just absorbing it. I feel like they're very vocal because
Yeah.
I'm listening very intently. I don't
Mhm.
know for a fact that, I think anybody that creates a product and puts it out there, there's a following and, a what we call like a core user or these people that just daily users of this thing, right?
Yeah.
Um, they're going to let you know, I think, regardless. But yeah, it's hard to say. I don't have a wide enough perspective of
Yeah.
the vocalness of other consumer products, but I feel like we hear you loud and clear. We're on the message boards. We're
Yeah.
listening to the reviews. We're looking for areas to improve for you. So yeah,
How
Yeah.
do you guys as a team though, like Steve, you were talking about how like you listen to everybody and the different departments and stuff. How do you guys in a team deal with the meeting of need versus the technology isn't there yet? So like there are many, many cases where, for example, like battery life is a great one, right? Is that everybody wants more battery life. I don't care what product it is. They're like, well, how come, my drill doesn't last more than 7 hours, whatever it is, right? But the technology is not there yet, but the need is there. So how do you think about that from a UX perspective when you're trying to solve for a problem and the technology just hasn't met up with it yet?
Yeah, the battery one is a great example because we know that that's something customers have been asking for like a super long time, right? Since the beginning of
Yeah.
hero cameras. And it's something that we are always working on. And it's sometimes painful to hear, feedback about runtimes and stuff because
Hmm.
we're doing so much in terms of optimizing the way the camera operates, right? And I don't think it's necessarily a GoPro problem either, right? Like you said earlier,
No,
like
it's
a
across the
lot of
industry. Yeah.
across the industry, just batteries and battery technology is, like you said, maybe not quite there yet in terms of what people expect. And in those cases, we got to get creative. We got to think outside the box. Like, we released a Volta battery grip, right?
Hmm.
It's a grip with a battery built in that like doubles the runtime of your camera, and it serves as a, it's like the Grant grip, right? But it's got a built-in battery. It's got the built-in legs that fold out. So like it's about coming at it from a more creative, or like what can we do? So like we reduced or released the Enduro battery, which
Hmm.
perform better in cold temperatures because the amazing engineers were able to figure out something with the chemistry, right? Like I can't speak to that, but like they they figured it out, right? So like every little bit of performance we can squeeze out, we're trying to pass on,
Yeah.
right? So um, I think you know they are taking a close look at all the technology that's available out there, right? So we're doing our best to sort of um, as we understand it and as we are building, to improve the product.
Well, I think young designers uh, may not have all the context of, you might look at something and you say, well, why don't they just double the size of the battery, like the
Mhm.
physical size? Or, there is a trade off that happens with UX all the time. You're constantly negotiating with engineering versus need versus design and these types of things. How do you guys, as, industry experts in this space, think about the trade offs? Like how do you reconcile those trade-offs? Because I'm sure there's people that are listening that are young designers and they're like, well, I don't want to trade that off. I want to give people that battery life that they all want, 8 hours or whatever it is. But you can't always do that because you're gonna compromise size, you're gonna compromise, there's all kinds of things, right? How do you reconcile that? Like what is the process in your head for both of you to reconcile those things?
there's a bunch of different facets to that conversation. I mean, obviously and definitely there's trade offs. Definitely, if you double the size of the battery, you're going to give somebody more weight to the camera. You're going to probably increase thermals. There's going to be something that you're losing in a different department. And sometimes you have to walk a compromise line for features and enhancements to the product, right? You have so many different variables and different use cases, and you don't want to alienate any group in particular. And sometimes you're pushing the envelope. We're innovators, we're industry leaders, and sometimes there's a feature that, yes, it's going to really improve the product for this certain group, and maybe not all, and it could potentially confuse others, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how does that? We take a lot of time understanding kind of where that sits in the user interface and how to access it. And we've really built this product and this experience where we know there's novice users buying these cameras, right?
Mm-hmm.
We know that someone's going to be new to the GoPro ecosystem, and it's a wide ecosystem. It covers accessory, camera, editing, app, desktop, web. There's so many different touch points here. And when somebody comes in, we want them to have a great experience. But then later on, as they grow with the product, or if somebody comes in at the high end of the spectrum, of somebody that literally works on a movie set and is leveraging this camera for advanced features, we need to provide them an experience also. And so we've kind of built this system where you can actually go deep into the UI, deep into these settings, and then surface them through customization right to the front of what we call the idle screen, or like the viewfinder, the live view. And that's that's at the very top of your experience, but we don't start you there. And so sometimes it's a conversation of, how can we allow this new trade-off to exist in the camera? How will a new user or an experienced user interact with that? And I think that can tell us a lot by, user research and prototyping. We do a heavily, as much as we can, we prototype or proof of concept things with our team to get them in the hands of our users and understand and watch intently if somebody's tripping over this or can't find it. And I think we start realizing kind of at what point we surface these trade-offs or how.
I mean, that's a good point, because like some of those features I may never even see personally, because I do not fully understand conceptually yet some of the things that are adjusted. Like I said, like, when do I leave that aperture open when I'm doing a jump, or what, like I'm not that deep into it because I don't do it every day. Like you said, I'm not at the beach every single day, but I'm sure there are people there. We know there are people that are, and you still have to serve them. So you're actually serving two user groups. You're serving like the beginners, the intermediates, and the advanced. I mean, and it seems like the advanced stuff, to some extent, you're like, well, they already kind of know what they're doing. But at the same time, you have to be able to surface the stuff quickly for them, is what you're saying. Like, they don't want to have to go through a bunch of menus to get to what they need, especially when they're about to do something big. Like I saw Kai Lenny the other day do a jump off of a wave and like twist in the air and do some crazy stuff. And I thought, what settings does he have on there? Like, because the video came out amazing. I'm like, how did you do that? Right. So that reconciliation, it sounds like for you, is Grant, is kind of like the idea that like we have different types of users and we have to kind of figure out how this stuff works across those users, as well as for them individually when they're kind of performing their chosen sport or activity. Is that correct?
I mean, I feel that way. I mean, we just want everyone to feel like this camera's for them. And if you're, if you can bring the controls that are important to you up to the front of the experience, or if you can create presets in the camera that, can switch the camera around and make it super quick, then you feel like there's a product for you. And if we only have that experience, if it was all ISO min and max on the front display, just so that somebody in the pro sphere can get that and leverage it and make the most beautiful content, then these other users would just feel like this isn't the product for me. I mean, we definitely, we look at the full spectrum, and I think that helps us navigate. And sometimes we take a chance, we push something a little bit farther forward, we'll definitely get the feedback from that shift,
Awesome. What about you, Steve? I mean, like, how do you reconcile those things? When you're sitting alone thinking about design features and stuff, like, how does your brain kind of parse that stuff out?
Yeah, generally, I think like I come with this sort of like a bit of a solution driven mindset of like, how do we do this? Like, how do we, for better or worse, right? Maybe it's not ready for prime time, but I'm just excited to get it on the camera, maybe because it's a feature I really like or I want to use, right? So
Yeah.
you have to kind of temper that a little bit with like, okay, what is it going to take, what kind of value is this bringing to the customer, first of all, right? Like, who is it targeted for? Kind of like what Grant was saying earlier, who's going to benefit the most from this? Is this just sort of like a me thing, or is it just sort of just solving it for one of our groups of audience members, our customer base, or can we design it in a way that it spans across and it helps solve a pain point or something that users have been asking for, like for variety of our customers,
Mhm.
So there's kind of that deep, kind of thinking about who is this going to serve, right? And sometimes, if it's something that maybe it's, not ready for prime time yet, we've built the design, we built it
Mhm.
in the, we've created mock-ups, we've created prototypes, we've tested it, we've shopped it around, and um, you know, product team is a huge partner of ours,
Mhm.
and we show them, and they might, they'll help us try to get it to the finish line, but there could be at this point where like, you know what, it's it's just coming up a little short right now, in terms of checking all the boxes of like what this particular camera is trying to do, and maybe it's better to just hold off. Why don't we wait a little bit? Why don't we, wait till we get a little bit more data, or why don't we wait till we get, technology improves a little bit to where, we can bring this feature without any compromises to a customer.
Yeah, it almost seems like one of your guys' secret sauces is the fact that being in the industry, being the industry leader, you guys have figured out what to provide and when. Like simple as that. Like this is a time to release this feature, and this is not a time to release this feature. Maybe in a couple years, or that kind of stuff. And getting the timing right for what your customers need. And I consider all of that user experience, because if you release something too soon, right, then people are tripping over it. And if you release it too late, they're like, hey, how come you didn't give this to us 2 years ago?
Yeah, absolutely. That's kudos to our product team. They think a lot about, what makes sense for a particular product at a certain time. So that also helps guide us in terms of like, what kind of features do we want to focus on and what do we want to build out? Yeah.
Yeah. So can we talk a little bit about accessories, because this is a topic I'm really interested in. So I have seen some contraptions created for GoPros that blow my mind. How do you guys feel when you see people like sawing PVC pipe and screwing them into their soft top surfboards, or putting them on I've seen them put them on the stems of the back of their mountain bikes, so that like there's one on each side. So as you turn left and turn right, you're like getting certain angles and stuff. How do you guys feel when you see people like hacking away like that and mounting their GoPros?
Oh, okay, guys. I looked at Grant. Grant's like smiling, and he's like, "Oh man, I got a lot to say about this." For me, I actually feel like I see a lot less of that now,
Oh,
because I feel
okay.
like our design team has done such a good job of making and improving the existing accessories that we have. Like the days of the PVC pipe are long gone. Like, now we've got extension poles, and we've got poles with like articulation, right? So
Yeah.
like I feel like and it grips with batteries. So I feel like teams at GoPro take a close look at that stuff and make the decision of whether or not it's going to serve like a majority of customers and needs and things like that. It
I
goes
think
through
you
like
need to get the message out to the guys
yeah,
on the North Shore, because they're still screwing like
yeah,
all kinds of weird
maybe
stuff into their boards.
yeah, maybe I need to get out there more. But yeah, I mean, I personally feel like the days of running down the hardware store and buying nuts and bolts and metal
Yeah.
brackets
Yeah.
are long gone. I feel like most of the things that we have now, I mean, I could have been inspired by a lot of that,
Yeah.
and but I feel like I've been able to find a mount for every sort of need or use case or angle or perspective that I'm
Me too.
that
Yeah,
I'm
I
looking
feel like you
for.
guys have a lot of options now,
Yeah,
compared to the early days. But I will tell you about the whole bolt thing, like being able to go to the hardware store. I kind of liked it, that you guys used a standard bolt, not some weird custom thing. Because if you did get stuck somewhere, you could run to a store and pick up a
yeah,
bolt if you needed it. Right? I thought that was like a good move on your part.
yeah, absolutely. This is a funny story too. It'd be like either on a hike or on a trail, and I'd randomly find like a GoPro quick release buckle. And I'm like, well, if you needed one, there's one somewhere around here.
Yeah.
It's hilarious. Like you'd find like a, if somebody dropped one or like a, the mounting screw, you just find one randomly. Like
Yeah.
it's just kind of funny. But yeah, I think the only mount that I think that we haven't done and probably have explored tons is like there's this one that I think it's on the top of the helmet and it actually spins.
Oh,
I think this is like an old one, like you see it with like mountain bike or motocross, where they had it. I think it was mounted to like a rollerblade wheel and a pole, and it just kind of like
nice.
swung around. But we don't, there's probably we probably didn't make it because it's dangerous.
Yeah.
Right. That's a good point. That's a good point. I mean, the narwhal, right? The one
Yeah.
that goes straight off your cam
Yeah.
or your helmet, like 4 feet out, and then
Oh,
looks
yeah.
back at you.
Yeah.
Super cool perspective. I mean, half the time when I see it in the wild, I'm like, oh, that's
Yeah.
going to be interesting. That's new
Yeah.
and different.
Well, even the one that goes in your mouth, everybody
Yeah.
uses those now, right? Where they hold them in
Yeah.
their mouth. And I
Yeah.
always thought to myself, may not be true. I've never tried it, but I thought I don't really want to land on my board with it in my mouth because I don't want to lose my teeth.
Oh,
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure it's padded or
Yeah.
whatever, but it's that angle that they're trying to get, and
Absolutely.
they'll pretty much do anything to get it. And it is pretty amazing, right? Some of the shots that they get. But I am
Yeah.
curious though, like Grant, like you make your own accessories, or at least you did in the old days. What do you think about this stuff? Like, do you love seeing everybody trying to make stuff? And
Yeah, I mean, I think it's cool. The thing that there's a certain level that I've come to understand when I'm out, right? I'll just give an example, but this is me in particular, not an amazing surfer, love surfing. Sometimes I'm pushing myself and going to a new spot. When I'm in a new spot, there's voice commands for the camera. There's things that I can leverage, but I don't want to interrupt anyone else's experience sometimes. I don't want to draw too much attention
oh
to
yeah,
the technology that's being infused into like what I'm doing. And I don't want it to be a part of anyone else's experience sometimes. So, maybe I take a little more of a back seat in that scenario, and I just use my finger and I turn the beeps off, and it may not be the best perfect experience for me, but I know that I'm not, polluting any other experience for anyone that cares. Maybe nobody cares, but when I see it out in the wild and, you're at like a common ski place and there's no shame in it, sometimes I see it immediately. I go, oh, that's going to be interesting. That's going to be a unique perspective. This is all GoPros. This is what we do. We enable you to get, a long time ago, you could watch a video of somebody running for 2 minutes that they posted on YouTube, and you might actually sit through it. But like now there's so much content being circulated. There's so much, need for everyone to try to grab your attention online that when I see something like down by your foot or on the side of your car and low, I'm like, see, you get a shot from that angle. Like I think of myself, I'm like, I know I've been learning from storytelling from all these guys in the media, and it's all about just capturing these unique, different viewpoints, right? And
yeah.
so I see it, I'm like, yeah, that's great. They're going to get something cool. I do think sometimes when I see something dangerous, you need to be a little bit wise. Like if you're spinning a mount around your head and you're like near some friends, and
the first time I actually realized that that there needed to be lots of different types of accessories was I actually strapped on a GoPro. I think it was a 3 Plus, and I put it on the chest harness, and I went down the hill skiing. And then I got back and I was like, "Hey, everybody, ready to see this?" And then I showed them, and I looked like I was moving really slow, and I was like, "This is super embarrassing." I was like, "I'm not showing this to anybody." And I realized that part of it had to do with editing, I assume. And I wanted to transition to this last kind of big area to talk about. And that's kind of the elephant in the room. And that's creating those GoPro videos, right? So everyone I talk to is like, I want my video to look like the one that you guys put out every year or however often you put them out, promoting a new camera or promoting a situation or event. Gosh, how do you even start to educate people on the camera, the accessory, the software, how to get to that point? You know what I mean? To make it look awesome and not like some slow guy like me going down a ski hill. I was like, this is done. This is not good. Like it's better when I have an accident, because it looks cooler.
I've shown Grant some of my mountain bike chesty footage on like some of the coolest, gnarliest trails and I go as fast as I dare.
Yep.
And I show him, and He's like,
It's
I think you
okay.
need to go a little faster, Steve. And I'm already riding like the wheels off it. So he
Hmm.
likes to give me a hard time about that. So I would say, Brian, you just need to go faster.
Oh man, I felt like I was going so fast. I think I was on like a black diamond or something, and I was
Yeah.
just like, "Look at me!" And I was like, "No, don't look at me. This is bad."
Yeah.
But I actually ended up putting it on the ski later. I went back skiing. I think 3 months later or something like that. I put it on the ski, and then seeing it on the ski was pretty rad, right? It was just like, "Oh my god, I look really fast on the ski because you're close to the ground." That was through experimentation, but it
Yeah.
did not look like the ones that you guys produce.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I want to get closer to that. I think a lot of people want to get closer to that.
Yeah. I
How do
think
you
that's,
guys educate from a UX perspective your customers to do that? And does the accessories matter? Like what is the things that you think about?
yeah, it all matters. And this is one of the biggest things that we try to help our customers with, right?
Okay.
Because we hear it loud and clear because the media team at GoPro sets such a high bar.
Oh
They're
yeah.
so talented. You watch any of the launch reels, you watch any of the $1 million challenge reels, they get people emotional,
Mm-hmm.
right? People get choked up. It hits them right in the feels when they see the type of content that the team produces. Are just super talented. And like, I think though, the steps that we've made to help the customers is first of all, like being able to use the UI on the camera, setting them up with best resolution, best stabilization, like what are the settings default out of the box that gets them the best content to start with first.
Mm-hmm.
And then, we've got a whole bunch of editing tools on the app from music to, beat sync
Mm-hmm.
and algorithms that help create edits that are interesting,
Yeah, that
that
stuff has come a long way.
it has,
Yeah.
and it's amazing. I mean, the goal has always been to go do your activity, live your best life, and have an edit ready for you, right? That
Mm-hmm.
you can watch and enjoy and share that it's just like how you remembered. But kind of getting back to the question is like, yeah, not only of just first of all making sure that the groundwork is laid, right? Like best settings for their particular activity, best stabilization, all the default settings are right for majority of the conditions.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also a pretty good element of education, like you said, right? Like that you alluded to that not everybody is like has a background in videography or photography,
Yeah.
right? So, a lot of it is like then driven by like the mounts and accessories, like, capture from different perspectives, capture at different angles.
When you look up those, sorry, I didn't actually look up the latest accessories you have, but do you actually state in there like if you're going to go through a tube while surfing, or if you're
Yeah.
right, this is the
Yeah.
angle, or this is the thing you need to do?
Yeah, there's definitely been more focus on that, like bundles that we put together for, certain activities, what types of mounts, what types of settings to use. So that speaks to the education piece of it, right? Like just helping users understand how to set everything up from the modes, the resolutions, the frame rates to the types of mounts that they could be using to help, right? So it all kind of comes together. Grant, I mean, please like chime in because I
Yeah,
know you've
yeah.
got a lot of
Well, so we try to
thoughts on
integrate
this.
education directly into the camera. I mean, almost painstakingly, we try to describe these very complex features
Mm-hmm.
and break them down and give a little bit of insight into every single. I mean, we have some terms out there that are novel to us, right? Like hyper smooth or time warp or just a variety. And then we have a lot of industry terms and, trying to just synthesize every setting and explain a little bit about that has been something that we've done over the years, and we continue to try to improve and always communicate with our users about what it's best used for.
Mm-hmm.
Like you were pointing out, there's verticals that you can search by and get recommendations on the web. There's you know it's hard because we've come and we've integrated so closely with media members, and you kind of have your own experience. I mean, for me, it was like my first takeaway in videography was when I was a kid, and my dad gave me one of those VHS
Yeah.
tape recorders, and I remember him telling me like, "Listen, you don't just walk around this party and record everything. Try to like, you only have a limited amount of time on this, and try to anticipate, before that kid's going to hit the pinata, not everything leading up to it. just take little snippets. And it's like that whole idea of editing in camera. And then you have less homework later. And then you have shorter, more concise moments. And that amounts to great storytelling, or most of the time, if you can capture what, if you can anticipate just a little bit. And then, of course, I mean, the media members, they're using sound and lighting and effects and transitions. I mean, that's just table stakes for a very high caliber edit and editing software. And we are looking at, I'm sure, improving every aspect of that for our users through software as much as possible, so that these people don't have to. You used to have a full-blown education in this stuff. And every year there's more automation in the industry that allows for people to just sit back. Right now you can capture more content and have us dice it up for you, put it to a beat, and serve it up to you while you grab a snack after your activity. So it's all leading towards more automation, I believe.
Yeah, and it seems like that's kind of the direction you guys are going, because the fact is that you can offload your video. That was huge, by the way. Being able to put it in the cloud, I mean, that's just game changing. So you're like moving all that stuff into the cloud. You're helping with that kind of, like you said, intro, exit, and a little bit of the music. Here's the mounts to kind of serve it up. It's like, it feels like it keeps getting closer and closer to the point where you come in as a brand new user and you're like, here's what I want to do with it. And they're like, here you go. Like, just go. And then if you want to go deep, you can go deep and try to figure things out. Cause like I saw a video one time, just as a side note, of I think it was a guy who was at the Vulcan Pipe Pro, or maybe it was the Billabong contest, and he was going over to another surfer's house to figure out what the settings are, because he was kind of paranoid that he was going to get out there, surf the contest, and then the content wasn't going to look right. And so they were like, "Oh man, what, you don't know how to do this?" And they're giving him a hard time. And then they just like showed him on the camera on the GoPro, like, "Here's the settings that work best for us. Here's what we use when we're out there. Like, it's really bright day today, that kind of stuff." And I thought that was really awesome. One is the community's doing it, and number two is that all those things are readily available. And now you're getting to the point where it's becoming upfront. Like, oh, you're going to go do this thing. We're going to tell you what to do before you get there. You're not going to panic when you get there that like you're not sure if it's going to turn out, or you're going to forget to turn it on, or any of that kind of stuff. All those steps are pre-prepared. And I wonder, like, if you get to a point where there's that kind of level of synergy, will it kind of take care of itself? Meaning, will the content not need to be so prescribed on how it's filmed, because of the fact that most of it is taken care of by machine learning or by AI or by, the recommendations you guys provide? Is that kind of like in the hopes that it gets that good that people can just jump in and make it happen?
I think so. I think that's like, the direction that we're moving in. And like, as I mentioned, we do a lot already in terms of like creating these, generated edits for you of like the best moments. And it's using a lot of technology behind the scenes, and also sort of take the pain out of editing, for a lot of users, that cater towards like the novice users or first time GoPro users. We really think a lot about that end to end experience now, right?
Yeah.
We recognize that capturing is only part of the experience, right? You want to be able to share this, and you want to get those reactions from your friends and family. So I do think that a lot of the technology has helped with some of that automation or some of the heavy lifting. But an interesting thing that you brought up and kind of touched on was the community too, right? There's plenty of resources now available. YouTube is a great example. I joke about, YouTube University. You can learn anything on there, right? There's so many customers produce their own videos and how-tos, right? Like, no secret, I'm a big mountain biker, and there's a lot of mountain bikers out there that produce that, it's their bread and butter. That's their job now, to produce mountain bike content of riding the world's best trails. And they will share their setups. They will share their settings. They will share recommendations how to get the best performance out of GoPro, or GoPro and the GoPro tools and accessories. So I think a lot of it is also just the stoke and the community based, sharing, right? And then of course, our teams here are paying close attention to that as well, and making like those bundles or putting out those educational pieces to help people. And, all the touch points, our ambassadors, our athletes, some of our in-house media folks, they have a wide reach, And people often ask like, hey, what setting should I use? And we're happy to share that stuff. So a lot of it is like community based as well, I think.
That's awesome. Well, guys, I don't want to take up your time forever. I know you're very busy, and I love this conversation. This has been great. But for fun, I wanted to wrap up and see if each of you would tell us one quick story about a time in which you either lost a camera, broke a camera, or did something totally crazy with your GoPro.
Grant is a great storyteller. Like he usually has all, because like I like to sit back and be like, oh, Grant, like so you go, man.
Man, oh, there's so many. I've made so many mistakes. I hope that makes people feel better. God, I don't know why, because there's like more intense situations, but this one time in Santa Cruz, I went out in the evening with my wife and we were at the boardwalk, and I just knew I found the coolest perspective of like the Big Dipper and all the lights that were soon to be turning on. It was like late afternoon and it was going to be going to evening. And I had this idea to do this, just such a cool time lapse of like, it started with the day, there's crowds moving. So I knew it'd be like a lot of action. There's a lot of stuff happening. So it'd be like, just really interesting. And then all of a sudden it turned to night and all the lights would come on. And I was just like, I felt like I'd found the perfect shot. And I sat there the whole time. We had like ice cream and kicked it while I just got this content that I was going to be like so excited to share with people at work and I don't know, just, out wider. And we got it. And I looked on the back and I remember just being like, this is going to make like a reel or something. I'm not a video editor, but I'm going to share this and everyone's going to be so psyched on me. So, we go to our hotel for the night. And then in the morning, I'm like, all right, I'm going to surf Steamer's Lane, which I'd done before and not too far from there. So I had a surfboard that was newer and I decided I brought the stickies and I know I should know better. I should like have put these on the night before. I should have heated them up and like applied them when the board was not like waxy or dirty or anything. Right. But I only put the first mount and then there's a tether, a secondary smaller sticky that goes on the tip. I was putting on the tip of the board. It can go anywhere that you leash your camera to.
Okay.
So like in the event that a really strong wave or who knows what the variable will be knocks your camera loose, which is hard to do, it would still be caught by this leash, by the secondary attachment. But I was like, I did it out in the parking lot with my wetsuit on minutes before I was going to get in the water. And I was like, it's never broken before. It's going to be fine. I had this content. I did not upload it the night before. I didn't do any of the stuff I knew I should. And I would go to the cliff. And one of the ways into the water is to jump off a cliff with the board kind of like under your arm and then in the last moment, you'll like let go of your board or whatever, if you're smart. So I get to the cliff and I jump in and it's deep. The water's like smashing up against the rocks and it's probably, I don't know how deep it is, but it's deep enough and dark enough that you can't see if the camera were to fall in. But when when the impact of that board smacked the water, I jump off, it's under my arm and I'm like, 6 feet before the water, I kind of like release it. And so that I'm not going to get smacked by it. It just must've hit the water and popped the camera right off. And it wasn't until I like pulled my board over and started paddling out from near the rocks to get away from the, any danger that I realized my camera was already missing.
It was gone.
And I didn't tether it. And this content that I was so excited for. And just, I don't know, maybe it wasn't once in a lifetime because I could try to recreate that, but it was a very perfect night for this. And I don't know, it just came to mind. It's like learnings and, doing all the best practices I could have.
Well, I think anytime you're out and about, like doing something active, there's a million things you have to think of in order to make sure that, you don't lose anything or you don't, break anything and that kind of stuff. And it was actually you who planted a very bad message in my head, which was over in Capitola. You showed me a video and I've never, ever thought about sharks surfing ever. Like I don't even care. I go out there, I do my thing and enjoy myself. And then you're like, hey, dude, you want to check out this video I made? There were sharks all over Capitola right where the surfers are on the line. And I was like, oh, why did you do that? And to this day, I tell my wife when we go out there, I go, Grant showed me this video and I'm sure they're out here, but I'm just going to forget about it. And I'd never thought about them. And I blame you for that because it was a beautiful, beautiful video. And you could just see the sharks moving underneath there. And actually, it made me realize they're probably always there and we just never filmed them like that before.
Yeah, yeah. It changed my life too. I've surfed those spots and I felt like, the surfers are right there. They didn't even know.
No.
It was like being in this weird position where you're like, you want to like yell to them, but I was flying a drone when I caught that, and
Yeah.
it was so far away that you're just like, well, you're just gonna either watch something happen, but the shark, it just cruised by in the background. It looked like he was on his own agenda.
It's not looking for us, right?
There's an awareness now, yeah, that especially over there, we caught many over the weekend, so we're like, wow, they are here. They're not too far from the lineup too.
No. Hey, Steve, I'm curious. I had an incident on my mountain bike where I was using the 3 and I forgot to tighten the nut. And I was going down the hill and it was like the most amazing shot. And then the camera went whoop and it just like fell down. So it's like pointing at the tire the entire time.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the footage I got. Have you ever had that?
Yeah. I think it's happened. I think it's happened to the best of us. You just forget to really crank it down, or the trail ends up being a little more gnarly than you expected.
Yeah.
It happens most often for me when I'm actually testing stuff.
Oh,
where I'm like, maybe, or I've hacked together some GoPro mounts together to create something that maybe wasn't intended. I think my story is more like I use the music mount. We had this articulating carbon fiber, beautiful mount that was designed to attach to like instruments.
Okay.
You could attach it to like a violin or someone playing guitar and get these super cool angles. But I'm like, hey, this is just the right length for GoPro Max on the end of my handlebars. Was it designed for that? Probably not. And I just remember going down the trail at pretty good speed and thinking like, there sure is a lot of vibration happening. And as soon as I hit like this rocky section, it was just like, boom, it just like ricocheted off because the vibration was just like flung off. And I had no idea what direction. It was a Max on the end of it too.
Oh, yeah.
And I felt like a crazy person going through all the thorn bushes and weeds, like trying to find where this, had no idea where it was. And I had used, I think I ended up using voice command, like GoPro photo mode, GoPro video mode, to hear it beep.
Oh,
to change
smart.
modes. And sure enough, it was just like stuck into this big bush, this thorn bush on the side, and I was able to recover it. But I was like on the verge of giving up because I'm like, I have no idea what direction this thing launched in. So the lesson there was not to use, mounts that weren't intended for, a certain reason. It was just me trying to be clever and, use parts that I had laying around. But thankfully I was able to find my camera. I hope, Grant, someday that camera washes up on shore. It's probably full of like barnacles but there's so many great stories of people finding these cameras that wash up and they eventually make it back to the user again because of the community, right? People are like, hey, I found this camera that washed up in this area, and then the power of the internet.
Yeah, I was actually watching one of Jamie O'Brien's videos, and they went diving over at the North Shore, and they found one, and then they looked at the camera. I don't know how they figured it out, but they looked at the camera and found out who the person was from the camera.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's additional details in there. And then they called the person, and then they mailed it to him. And I was like, dude, cool. That's rad. Right?
Yeah, that's super cool.
Cool. Well, guys, thank you so much for doing this. I really, really appreciate it. This has been amazing. And I can already guarantee you that we're going to get emails that they want you to come back on, and then they're going to have specific questions. So hopefully we'll have an opportunity to sync up again and ask more specific questions about GoPros, designing, user experience. But this has been phenomenal. So thank you both for doing this. And thanks to everyone so much for taking the time to listen to us today. We really appreciate it. As we mentioned, since the beginning of the year, we will also put all of our updates on YouTube now, as well as a video version of the podcast. We're not actually putting like recorded video, but we're putting the podcast on there for now. So please go to our YouTube page and subscribe to our channel. If you like this podcast, found it interesting or informative, it helps us a great deal if you subscribe or leave a review on whatever platform you use. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you all next week.